My name is Jenny. I'm 31 years old. The screen on the cheap flip phone glowed, too bright in the dim light of my old Honda. I was parked across the street from a rundown diner, the kind of place where the coffee is always a little burnt, but no one rushes you out. It felt like the right place to be. A place for endings and beginnings. In my purse, tucked inside a plain white envelope, was a piece of paper that could buy this diner 100 times over. It could buy the whole block. It could buy the whole town. I won $384 million. The biggest lottery jackpot in the history of the state. My hands trembled as I held the phone. It was a stupid little thing I bought for $20 at a gas station. No contacts, no pictures, no history. It was clean. It was the perfect tool for what I had to do. Because before I touched a single cent of that money, before I let it change my life, I had to do one last thing. I had to call my family. I had to call them and pretend I was broke. Pretend I was at the end of my rope. I needed to ask for just enough to see what they would do. $50. That was the magic number. Small enough to be easy, but big enough to be an excuse. It was a test. A final, desperate test to see if anyone cared about me. Just me. Not what I could do for them. Not what I could give them. Just Jenny. I scrolled through the contacts I had just punched in, my thumb hovering over the names. Mom, Dad, Sophie, Eli, my family. The people who were supposed to love me no matter what. My breath hitched, a little sob catching in my throat. I already knew, didn't I? I think a part of me had always known, but I needed to hear it. I needed the proof. My eyes were wet, the streetlights outside blurring into long, hazy streaks. I could feel the weight of every dollar in that envelope, and it felt colder and heavier than I ever imagined. It wasn't a ticket to freedom. Not yet. It was a magnifying glass. One I was about to hold over the cracked and broken pieces of my own family. I whispered it to the empty passenger seat, to the fogged-up windshield, to the person I used to be. I won. And it means nothing if I'm still alone. My thumb pressed down on the first name on the list. The phone started to ring, the sound loud and shrill in the quiet car. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared to have my heart broken one last time, because only one person showed up. And it wasn't who you'd think. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment, where are you watching from? Before the lottery ticket, before the phone calls, my life was a series of quiet duties. I was Jenny, the responsible one. The one you called when you needed a ride from the airport, when you needed someone to watch your dog, or when you needed a few $100s to float you until your next big idea took off. I was the filler in the family photo, the one standing slightly off to the side, smiling pleasantly, making sure everyone else looked good. My life was predictable. I was a dental hygienist. I cleaned teeth, I paid my bills on time, and I showed up for Sunday dinner every single week without fail. It was at one of those dinners that the cracks started to look like canyons. We were all gathered around my parents' dining table. The table was covered with my mom's best china, the plates we only used for holidays and Sunday dinners. The air smelled of roasted chicken and my mom's perfume. It was supposed to feel like home. It usually just felt like a stage. My brother Eli was holding court, as always. At 33, Eli was their visionary entrepreneur. That's what they called him. He had a new startup idea every 6 months, each one more brilliant and less profitable than the last. He talked about disrupting markets and synergizing assets, but he'd never worked a real 9-to-5 job in his life. He lived off our parents' belief in him, and more practically, my money. The new platform is all about leveraging user-generated content in the wellness space, Eli said, waving his fork for emphasis. It's like Instagram, but for your soul. My dad nodded, his eyes shining with pride. That's fantastic, son. A real game changer. My mother reached over and patted Eli's hand. We are so proud of you, honey. You just have to keep believing in your vision. My sister, Sophie, was busy taking a selfie with her piece of chicken. At 28, Sophie was the pretty one. Her life was a curated collection of brunch photos, concert tickets, and charmingly helpless shrugs. She got by on her looks and her ability to make other people solve her problems. She looked up from her phone just long enough to chime in. That sounds so cool, Eli. You're going to be like a billionaire. I sat there pushing a green bean around my plate. I had news too. It wasn't world-changing. It wasn't going to make me a billionaire, but it was my news. It was important to me. I cleared my throat. The conversation paused for a brief second. 3 sets of eyes turned to me, their expressions blank, as if they'd forgotten I was there. I got a promotion at work, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They made me head hygienist. It comes with a small raise. My mother gave me a tight, polite smile. The kind you give a stranger who holds the door for you. Oh, that's nice, dear. She immediately turned back to Eli. Her entire body shifted, her focus locking back onto her real priority. Now, Eli, you were saying you needed a bit more cash flow to get the prototype built. The air went out of my lungs. That's nice, dear. The three most dismissive words in the English language. My small victory, the thing I had worked so hard for, was just a little bump in the road on the way back to the main attraction. Eli and his imaginary company. My dad didn't even bother with the platitudes. He looked directly at me, his expression serious, like we were discussing a business deal. Jenny, you've always been good with money. Thrifty. He said thrifty like it was a medical condition. Your brother just needs a little push to get this thing off the ground. We all need to support him. I looked from my dad's expectant face to my mom's adoring gaze on Eli, to Sophie, who was now scrolling through her phone again, completely checked out. Eli just sat there smiling that easy, confident smile of his. He wasn't even going to ask for himself. He didn't have to. He had them to do it for him. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. It was so familiar. It was the feeling of being seen not as a person, but as a resource. I was the family ATM, the human safety net. My successes weren't for celebrating. They were for leveraging. My promotion didn't mean I could finally start saving for a down payment on a small condo. It meant I had more disposable income to pour into the black hole of Eli's dreams. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout, "What about me? When is it my turn?" I wanted to ask them if they had any idea how hard I worked, how tired I was, how much I sacrificed just to stay afloat while they all dreamed. But I didn't. I never did. Instead, a strained smile stretched across my face. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. They were words I had been trained to say my whole life. "Sure," I said, my voice sounding distant and hollow even to my own ears. "Family helps family," Eli's smile widened. "Thanks, Jen. You're the best. I knew I could count on you." My dad clapped his hands together. "That's the spirit, see? When we all pull together, this family can do anything." The conversation moved on. They started talking about the features of Eli's app, about branding, about success. I just sat there in silence, the taste of chicken turning to ash in my mouth. I felt invisible. Worse than invisible. I felt like a tool, a wallet, a stepping stone for everyone else. I looked down at my hands, the hands that worked hard every day, that paid for the gas in their cars and the groceries in their fridge more times than I could count. And in that moment, sitting at a table groaning with food, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me most, I had never felt so hungry, so completely and utterly starved. The Sunday dinner was just the beginning. It was the moment the unspoken rules of our family were spoken aloud. And once they were spoken, they became law. "Family helps family," I had said. That phrase became my cage. Eli needed $900 for his rent. He called me, his voice casual, as if he were asking for the time. "Hey Jen, can you spot me for this month? The angel investors are just finalizing the paperwork. It's a sure thing. Just for 1 month?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah, totally. 1 month max." That 1 month turned into 2, then 3. It became a permanent line item in my budget. My salary, the one I earned from my promotion, went straight from my bank account to his landlord. He never mentioned the investors again. He never said thank you. The first of the month would roll around and I'd get a text. Not a question, a statement. "Hey, rent is due." Then it was Sophie. She called me crying one night. She had maxed out her credit card on a trip to Miami with her friends. The pictures were all over her Instagram. Sophie in a bikini on a yacht. Sophie with a cocktail at a rooftop bar. Sophie posing with a designer handbag. "I don't know what to do, Jen," she sobbed into the phone. "The interest is killing me. My credit score is going to be ruined. Mom and Dad will kill me if they find out." I felt that familiar tug, the need to fix things, the need to be the responsible one. I spent the evening on the phone with her, calming her down. The next day, I transferred over $2,000 to her account, nearly all of my savings. "You're a lifesaver," she texted me. "I owe you big time." She never mentioned it again. A week later, she posted a picture of a new pair of expensive shoes. I just stared at it, a hollow feeling echoing in my chest. It wasn't just the big things. It was a constant stream of small cuts. My mom would call, "Jenny, the property taxes are due and we're a little short this quarter. You know how tight things are." I'd pay them. My dad's car would break down. "Jenny, the mechanic says it's the transmission. Could you help your old man out?" I'd cover the repairs. No one ever asked if I was okay. No one ever asked if I was short. It was just assumed that Jenny would handle it. Jenny had a steady job. Jenny was good with money. Jenny didn't have an exciting life, so what else would she be spending it on? I was their emergency fund, their solution, but I was never their daughter or their sister. Not in the way that mattered. The deepest cut came on a Tuesday. I woke up with a fever, my body aching and my throat on fire. I called in sick to the clinic, something I rarely ever did. I spent the day in bed, drifting in and out of a miserable sleep. That weekend was our monthly family brunch. I knew I wouldn't be well enough to go. I texted my mom on Friday. Hey mom, I'm really sick with the flu. I don't think I'll be able to make it to brunch on Sunday. Don't want to get anyone else sick. I expected a feel better soon, or do you need anything? I waited. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from her. You could have at least told Sophie so she could invite someone interesting. I read the text once, then twice, then a third time. The words burned into my screen. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was just the truth. My absence wasn't a loss. It was a social inconvenience. My spot at the table wasn't my spot. It was just a chair that could be filled by someone more entertaining. I dropped my phone on the bed. The fever, the aches, the sore throat, they all faded away, replaced by a cold, sharp pain in my chest that was far worse. I was a placeholder, a warm body to fill a seat until a better option came along. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed and walked into my small kitchen. I leaned against the counter, the cool laminate pressing against my back. My gaze fell on a crack in the floor tile near the sink. It had been there since I moved in, a tiny hairline fracture that I always meant to fix but never got around to. I stared at that crack, and I saw myself, ignored, passed over. A small, unimportant flaw in a house that no one else really noticed. I was a utility. I was there to keep the lights on and the rent paid for everyone else. But my own foundation was cracking and nobody cared. Nobody was even looking. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. I didn't bother to wipe it away. I whispered it into the dark, silent kitchen. The words were quiet, but they felt like the loudest thing I had ever said. I'm everyone's backup plan, but I am no one's first thought. And in the silence that followed, I understood that nothing was ever going to change. Not unless I changed it. The weeks that followed were a gray blur. I went to work. I cleaned plaque off strangers' teeth, listening to them talk about their vacations, their kids, their lives. I would smile and nod, my face a perfect mask of professional interest. But inside, I felt a growing sense of detachment, like I was watching my own life from a great distance. I paid Eli's rent. I sent Sophie money for her car insurance. I showed up for Sunday dinner and said nothing of substance, my voice becoming part of the background hum of the refrigerator. The text message from my mom had severed something inside me. A thin, frayed cord of hope I didn't even know I was holding on to. The hope that one day they would see me. Really see me. Now I knew they never would. I felt utterly and completely alone. One evening, after a particularly draining day at the clinic, my car's gas light blinked on. I pulled into a brightly lit, sterile-looking gas station. The kind of place that exists everywhere and nowhere. As I filled the tank, the automatic, repetitive click of the pump was the only sound. I went inside to pay. The air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The clerk behind the counter was a young man, probably in college, with tired eyes and a bored expression. He scanned my debit card. As he handed it back to me, his eyes flickered to a large, colorful display behind him. A sign screamed in bold letters, State Lottery, $384 million. Biggest jackpot ever. He gestured to it with a nod. You should get a ticket. Biggest jackpot ever. I almost said no. It seemed like a ridiculous thing to do. A waste of $2 I didn't really have to spare. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. But then I looked at his tired face, and I saw a reflection of my own exhaustion. We were both just going through the motions. A strange, reckless feeling flickered inside me. A little spark in the vast gray emptiness. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Why not? I let the machine pick the numbers. Quick pick. I didn't have the energy to pretend that my own choices mattered, not even for a lottery ticket. The clerk handed me the small slip of paper. I shoved it into my purse without a second glance and walked out. 2 nights later, I was home, sitting on the edge of my bed. I was getting ready for sleep. Another day over. Another night of staring at the ceiling ahead of me. My small television was on, the local news anchor talking in a low, monotonous voice. My phone, lying face down on my nightstand, buzzed. It was probably a reminder from my bank that my balance was getting low again. I ignored it. The news anchor's voice cut through my haze. And now for the story everyone is talking about. The winning numbers for the record-breaking $384 million state lottery jackpot were drawn just moments ago. A flicker of something. Curiosity? Irony? Made me sit up. I remembered the slip of paper in my purse. I got up, rummaged through the receipts and loose change, and pulled it out. It was already crumpled. The numbers appeared on the screen, big and bold. 21, 33, 45, 54. Powerball. Wait. I looked down at the slip of paper in my hand. My eyes scanned the first line of numbers. They didn't match. Or the second. Or the third. I was about to toss it in the trash when I saw the fourth line. My breath caught in my throat. 21, 33. My heart started to pound. A slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I read the rest of the line, my finger tracing the numbers as if I couldn't trust my own eyes. 45, 54, Powerball 08. They were all there. Every single one. I sat down on my bed. A profound silence fell over the room. The television was still on, the news anchor now talking about a local bake sale, but I couldn't hear him. The world had gone quiet. All I could hear was the frantic humming of blood in my ears. I checked the numbers again. And again. I went online and checked the official lottery website. The numbers stared back at me, clinical and unforgiving in their certainty. $384,000. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like me. People like me didn't get lucky breaks. We just kept our heads down, paid our bills, and hoped for the best. But it was real. The numbers on the screen matched the numbers in my hand. I waited for the wave of excitement, the joy, the screaming and shouting I always saw in movies. But it didn't come. Instead, a deep, hollow ache spread through my chest, the kind of ache you feel when you realize you're completely alone in a moment that should be shared. Who would I even call? If I called my mom, she'd immediately start planning how to spend it on Eli. If I called Eli, he'd call it our money. If I called Sophie, she'd ask for a new car. If I called my dad, he'd give me a lecture on responsible investing, and then ask for a loan for my brother. Their first thought wouldn't be for me. It would be for what the money could do for them. The money would just make me a bigger, better resource, a more efficient tool. It wouldn't make them love me. It wouldn't make them see me. I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling, the winning ticket resting on my chest. It felt as heavy as a gravestone. The silence in my apartment pressed in on me. I was the richest woman in the state, and I had never felt more isolated. A question, cold and clear, formed in my mind. It was a question that had been hiding in the shadows for years, but now, in the stark reality of this moment, it stepped into the light. If I disappeared tomorrow, I whispered to the empty room, if I just vanished without a trace, would they even notice until the bills stopped getting paid? And in the crushing silence, I knew the answer. And that was the moment I didn't just break. I snapped. The next morning, the sun came up just like it always did. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The shock from the night before had cooled into a hard, clear resolve. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what my family needed or what they expected of me. I was thinking about what I needed. And what I needed was the truth. Not the half-truths and polite fictions we told each other over Sunday dinner. I needed the cold, hard, undeniable truth. I didn't go to work. I called in and said I had a family emergency, which felt strangely accurate. My first stop wasn't a bank or a financial advisor. It was a law firm. I found the biggest, most reputable one in the city. The kind of place with a quiet, carpeted lobby and names etched in brass on the walls. I met with a lawyer named Arthur Chen. He was an older man with kind eyes, but a no-nonsense demeanor. I didn't tell him my name. I just showed him the ticket. He looked at it, then looked at me over the top of his glasses. He didn't seem surprised or overly excited. He just nodded, as if a woman with a 384 million lottery ticket walked into his office every day. The first thing we do is protect you, he said, his voice calm and steady. We will set up an anonymous trust. The prize will be claimed by the trust, not by you personally. Your name will never be made public. You will be a ghost, a ghost. The word resonated deep inside me. I had felt like a ghost in my own family for years. Maybe it was time to make it official. I spent hours with him, signing papers, setting up accounts, making decisions with a clarity that surprised me. I was calm, deliberate. Every signature felt like a step away from the person I used to be, the person who always said yes, the person who paid for love. Arthur explained the process, the taxes, the investment strategies, but my mind was somewhere else. It was fixated on a single burning thought. If I gave them everything, they'd still think I owed them more. Giving them money now would solve nothing. It would just reinforce the roles we had all been playing for decades. They would see the money, not me. Their gratitude, if any, would be for the cash, not for the person who gave it to them. It would be another transaction, the biggest one yet, but a transaction all the same, and I was done with transactions. I need to do something first, I told Arthur. Before I access any of the funds, he leaned back in his leather chair. What is it? I need to know who would show up if I had nothing. A flicker of understanding crossed his face. He'd probably seen it all before. Families torn apart by money or by the lack of it. That afternoon, I left his office and drove to a strip mall on the other side of town. I walked into a cheap prepaid cell phone store. The air smelled like plastic and air freshener. I bought the simplest phone they had, a flip phone, the kind that couldn't do anything but make calls and send texts. I paid in cash. I sat in my car in the parking lot and held the small phone in my hand. It felt light, anonymous. It was my tool. I saved 4 numbers in it. Mom, Dad, Eli, Sophie. The plan formed in my mind, simple and brutal. I would call each of them. I would tell them I was in trouble. I lost my wallet, my car broke down, something believable. And I would ask for a small amount of money, just enough to get by for a day or two. I decided on the amount. $50, it wasn't a trick. It wasn't a game. It was data collection. I wasn't going to be angry or emotional on the phone. I would be desperate, yes, but calm underneath. I rehearsed the words in my head, pitching my voice to sound shaky and scared. I practiced in the empty car until the sound of my own fake panic made my stomach turn. This wasn't about revenge. I knew even then that revenge was a hollow prize. It was about closure. It was about getting an answer so definitive that I could finally stop asking the question. The question that had haunted me my whole life. Am I loved for who I am or for what I can give? I would give them one last chance to choose me over themselves. If they said yes, if they offered that small bit of help without hesitation or complaint, I would know there was something left to save. I would pay them back double, triple, whatever they wanted. Maybe we could even start to heal. But if they said no, if they made excuses, if they lectured me, if they turned me away when I was pretending to be at my lowest point, then I would have my answer. And I would finally stop paying for a love that was never real. My thumb hovered over the first contact. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This was it. The breaking point. The moment everything would change, for better or for worse. I took a deep, shaky breath and pressed the call button. I sat in my car in the deserted parking lot, the cheap flip phone feeling heavy and cold in my hand. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. This was it. The moment of truth. My stomach was a tight knot of dread and a strange clinical curiosity. I had run the experiment in my head 1,000 times. Now it was time to see the results. I took a deep, shaky breath, let it out slowly, and pressed the first number on my contact list. My mother. The phone rang 3 times, each shrill tone echoing the frantic beat of my own heart. Finally, she picked up. Hello? Her voice was clipped, impatient. I could hear the sound of a television in the background. This was the performance of my life. I let a sob catch in my throat, a trick I had practiced until it felt real. Mom? I whispered, making my voice sound small and frayed. Mom, it's Jenny. Jenny? What's wrong? You sound terrible. There was a flicker of concern, but it was quickly replaced by annoyance. And why are you calling from this strange number? I lost my wallet, Mom. My phone was in it, everything. I'm stranded. I let my voice break on the last word. A long, heavy sigh came through the receiver. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of my problems being an inconvenience. Jennifer, really? You're 31 years old. How do you just lose your wallet? You need to be more responsible. The lecture was so predictable it was almost comforting. It was the script she always followed. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, began to slow to a dull, heavy thud. I know, Mom. I'm so sorry, I pleaded, sticking to my own script. I'm a few hours out of town. I was visiting a friend from the clinic. I just need a little help. I need $50 just to get a bus ticket home. My friend here doesn't have any cash, but if you could send it to her account, I can pay you back on Friday, I swear. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with calculation. I could practically hear her mind working, weighing the cost of the $50 against the cost of the drama. $50? She said, her voice turning hard. Jenny, do you have any idea the kind of pressure your brother is under right now? He's trying to launch a business. A real business. Your father and I are stretched to the absolute limit trying to support his dream. Every penny counts. And you're calling me about $50 because you were careless? The mention of Eli was like a punch to the gut, but I had expected it. He was always the excuse. He was always the priority. My emergency was trivial compared to his ambition. Mom, please, I whispered, a real tear finally escaping and tracing a cold path down my cheek. I'm scared. I just want to come home. Don't be so dramatic, she snapped. You're a grown woman. Figure it out. Call one of your friends. Don't guilt us with your problems. We have enough of our own. Click. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I stared at the phone in my hand, the screen now dark. She didn't ask if I was safe. She didn't ask where I was. She just hung up. The coldness of it was absolute. It was so much worse than I had imagined. The data was in. The result was clear. I took a moment, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and dialed the next number. My brother Eli, he answered on the second ring, his voice loud and booming like he was in the middle of a party. Yo, Eli? It's Jenny. Jen. Hey, weird number. What's up? I repeated the story, my voice now genuinely shaky from the encounter with my mother. I told him about the lost wallet, the phone, being stranded. I got to the part about needing $50. A loud laugh erupted from his end of the line. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was mocking, incredulous. $50? Jen, are you serious? He chuckled. You're the one with the steady job, the head hygienist. You make decent money. What did you do, blow it all on dental floss? It's not a joke, Eli, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm in trouble. Look, I'm totally tapped out right now, he said, his tone shifting from mockery to annoyance. I'm funding my business, remember? Every dollar is going into Crypto Connect. I'm all in. You can't make small-time problems my issue right now. It's bad for my focus. Ask Sophie. She's always got cash for a shopping spree. She can spot you $50. Don't make this weird. Before I could even respond, he said, Gotta go. Big networking call. Ciao. Click. He was gone. He hadn't just said no. He had belittled me, dismissed my problem as small time, and then passed me off to our sister like I was a telemarketer. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I felt a wave of dizziness. 2 for 2. My experiment was a resounding success. I took another shaky breath and dialed Sophie. Her voice was a cheerful sing-song. Hello? I could hear music and other people laughing in the background. Sophie, it's me, Jenny. I'm on a different phone. Oh my God, Jen. Hi! I can barely hear you. This pregame party is insane, she shouted over the noise. What's up? I gave her the abbreviated version of the story. My words clipped and hurried. I lost everything, Sophie. I'm stuck. I just need $50 to get a bus ticket home. There was a pause, and I heard her cover the phone, her voice muffled as she said something to someone next to her. Then she was back. Oh, wow, that totally sucks. She giggled. A giggle. I was telling her I was stranded and scared, and she giggled. But like my timing is the worst right now. I literally just bought front row tickets to see the Lumineers. They were a fortune. My bank account is like crying. Priorities, you know? Priorities. Concert tickets were a priority. Her stranded sister was not. Sophie, please, I said, the words catching in my throat. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. I know. Hey, have you tried asking Mom and Dad? She said, completely oblivious. Anyway, gotta run. We're about to do shots. Text me when you get home. Mwah! Click. 3 calls. 3 rejections. 3 nails in the coffin of the family I thought I had. I felt numb, hollowed out. There was only 1 call left to make to them. My father. I had saved him for last. A tiny, stupid part of me hoping he might be different. That the dad who taught me how to ride a bike might still be in there somewhere. He answered quietly. Hello? Dad, it's Jenny. I told him the story for the 4th and final time. My voice was flat now, devoid of all emotion. I was just reciting lines. I finished and waited. He was silent for a long time. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. For a wild second, I thought he was considering it. I thought he might actually help. Then he spoke, his voice low and disappointed, like a teacher addressing a failing student. Jennifer, you have a good job. You have a steady income. An emergency like this shouldn't happen. This is a failure to budget properly. You need to have an emergency fund for situations like this. This is a life lesson for you. A life lesson. He wasn't going to help me. He was going to lecture me on financial responsibility while I was, for all he knew, alone and in danger. So, is that a no? I asked, my voice as cold as ice. This is an opportunity for you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, he said, his voice firm. I'm not going to enable your irresponsibility. Click. He hung up. That was it. The test was complete. The results were unanimous. I set the phone down on the passenger seat. My throat was tight, but I couldn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard certainty that had settled in my bones. I was completely and utterly alone. Then I remembered. There was one more number, not part of the official test. A long shot. A name that wasn't on the core list of my immediate family. My cousin, Emily. We hadn't been close in years, not since we were kids. She lived 3 hours away, worked as a vet tech, and we only saw each other at the odd holiday or funeral. But I remembered her being kind. With nothing left to lose, my thumb, moving on its own accord, dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. Hello? Emily? It's your cousin Jenny. Jen! Wow, hey! What's up? Is everything okay? Her voice was warm, instantly concerned. It was so different from the others that it was jarring. The dam inside me broke. The emotion I had been holding back all evening came pouring out. I started to cry, ugly, heaving sobs. No, I managed to choke out. No, everything is not okay. I told her a shortened, less dramatic version of the story. I just said my car broke down, my wallet was gone, and I was stuck at a motel off the highway, 2 hours from home. I didn't even get to the part about asking for money. She cut me off. Okay, stop. Don't worry about it. Her voice was calm, decisive. There was no hesitation. No lecture, no sigh. Text me the address of the motel from that phone. I'll be there tonight. Don't talk to anyone, just lock your door and wait for me. I'm leaving right now. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Emily, you don't have to do that. It's a 3-hour drive. Jenny, shut up, she said, but her voice was full of kindness. Of course I have to. That's what family does. Now text me the address. I'll see you in a few hours. Click. She hung up. But this time, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with a feeling so foreign I could barely identify it. It was hope. I texted Emily the address of a cheap motel just off the interstate, a place I had passed 100 times but never noticed. It had a flickering neon sign that said motel, with the M and the L burnt out, so it just read OTE. It seemed fitting. I paid for a room in cash, the crisp bills from my secret purse feeling like props in a movie. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and pine-scented cleaner. The bedspread was a faded floral pattern, thin and scratchy to the touch. It was the loneliest place I had ever been. For the next 3 hours, I just sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The calls replayed in my head on a relentless loop. My mother's sigh, Eli's laugh, Sophie's giggle, my father's lecture. Each memory was a fresh cut. I had known, hadn't I? Deep down, I had known they would fail the test. But hearing it, experiencing the 4 neat clinical dismissals one after the other, had shattered something inside me. The last fragile layer of denial had been stripped away, leaving the raw, ugly truth exposed. They did not love me. They loved my utility. And without it, I was nothing to them. I stared at the peeling paint on the wall, feeling a profound and terrifying emptiness. The $384 million was an abstraction. It didn't feel real. This motel room, this crushing loneliness, this felt real. I wondered if Emily would really come. Maybe she'd think about the long drive, the gas money, the late hour, and change her mind. Maybe she'd call back and make an excuse. At that point, I wouldn't have been surprised. I was prepared for it. Just after 11 p.m., a pair of headlights swept across the thin curtains of my window. I peeked out. A beat-up old Subaru was pulling into the parking spot directly in front of my room. The engine cut, and Emily got out. She looked tired from the drive, but her face was etched with worry. In one hand, she was holding a greasy paper bag from a fast food restaurant. In the other, she was clutching a small white envelope. I opened the door before she could knock. We just looked at each other for a second under the buzzing, burnt-out neon sign. Then her face softened, and she rushed forward, pulling me into a hug. It wasn't a polite air kiss kind of hug. It was a real solid hug, the kind that says, I'm here. You're safe. I started to cry again, burying my face in her shoulder. She just held me, rubbing my back until the sobs subsided into shaky breaths. Come on, let's go inside, she said gently, leading me back into the dreary room. She kicked the door shut with her foot. She put the paper bag on the small round table. I brought you a burger and some fries, she said, her voice soft. I figured you probably haven't eaten, right? The simple question, the basic act of thinking about my needs, was so overwhelming that my eyes filled with tears again. No one had asked me that. No one had considered my hunger, my fear, my physical well-being. They had only considered how my problem affected them. And this, she said, pushing the small white envelope across the table towards me. It's all I could pull together from the ATM on my way out of town. It's $120. Is that enough to get you home? If not, I can probably— Emily, stop, I whispered, my voice thick. I couldn't bear her kindness. It was too much. She looked at me, her brow furrowed with concern. What is it, Jen? What's really going on? You can tell me. And so I did. In that cheap, lonely motel room, under the dim light of a single flickering lamp, I told her everything. I told her about the years of being the family ATM, about Eli's rent and Sophie's credit card bills. I told her about the Sunday dinner, about my promotion being dismissed. I told her about my mother's text message when I was sick. And then, I told her about the lottery ticket. I watched her face as I spoke, expecting shock, disbelief, maybe even jealousy, but she just listened. Her expression never changed. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, her focus entirely on me, absorbing every painful word. When I finally finished, the story hanging in the stale air between us, she was quiet for a long time. She looked at the fast food bag, then at the envelope with her money in it, then back at me. "Wow," she said softly. It wasn't an exclamation of surprise. It was a breath of empathy. "The calls tonight," I said, my voice barely audible. "It was a test. I had to know for sure." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her hand was warm. "You didn't need to test them, Jen," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "You already had your answer. You've had it for years. You don't owe anyone proof of their bad behavior. You just owe yourself peace." Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. You just owe yourself peace. It was such a simple idea, but it was revolutionary to me. My entire life had been about what I owed other people. It had never occurred to me that the primary debt I carried was to myself. We didn't talk much after that. We ate the burgers and fries in a comfortable silence. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. Later, Emily took the single armchair, insisting I take the bed. I fell asleep to the sound of her soft, steady breathing, a human presence in the dark that kept the loneliness at bay. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. The heavy, crushing weight in my chest was still there, but it had shifted. It was no longer the weight of despair. It was the weight of decision. Emily was already awake, sipping a cup of terrible-looking coffee from the in-room machine. "Morning," she said with a small smile. I smiled back. I took a deep breath. "Emily," I began, my voice clear and firm. "Thank you for coming. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." I reached into my purse, the one with the lottery ticket, and pulled out a checkbook from one of the new accounts Arthur had helped me set up. I wrote her a check for $10,000 and slid it across the table. She stared at it, her eyes wide. "Jenny, what is this?" "I can't take this." "Yes, you can," I said. "It's not a reward. It's not even a thank you. It's an investment. It's the first dollar I'm spending from that ticket, and I want it to go to the only person who showed up when it mattered." I paused. Then I asked the question that had been forming in my mind all morning. "Will you help me? Not with the money, but with what to do with it. Will you help me build something good?" She looked from the check to my face, a slow understanding dawning in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I want to start a foundation," I said, the idea feeling more real as I spoke it aloud. "A fund for people like me, people who work hard, who help everyone, who are always the responsible one, and who never, ever get helped back. The people who get told to be more responsible when they ask for $50. Emily looked at me, a slow, wide smile spreading across her face. "Something boring and honest," she said, as if reading my mind. I nodded, a matching smile on my own face. "Exactly. No talk about unicorns or disrupting paradigms. Just helping people. Second chances. The Second Chances Fund," she said, trying the name out. She tapped the check on the table. "Okay, Jen, I'm in. Let's make something boring and honest." In that moment, in that dingy motel room, surrounded by the wreckage of my old family, a new one began to form. It wasn't based on blood or obligation. It was based on a shared understanding, on a quiet promise to show up. It was a family of two, but it was more real than anything I had ever known. For 2 weeks, I lived in a strange sort of limbo. I worked with Arthur Chen and a small team of accountants to finalize the legal structures for the trust and the Second Chances Fund. Emily and I spent hours on the phone, brainstorming, talking about what the fund would look like, who it would help, and how. We were building something new, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose that was entirely my own. It had nothing to do with my family's needs or expectations. It was mine. During that time, I didn't speak to my family, and they didn't speak to me. My silence wasn't unusual. I was often the one to go quiet after a particularly draining family event. They probably assumed I was sulking. They had no idea that my silence wasn't passive. It was a wall I was actively building brick by brick. Then, the news broke. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at work, cleaning a patient's teeth, when my personal cell phone, the one my family had the number for, started buzzing in my pocket. It buzzed again, and again. It was so incessant that the patient in the chair gave me a curious look. "Sorry about that," I mumbled, finishing the polishing. During my lunch break, I finally looked at my phone. I had 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. My blood ran cold. My first thought was that something terrible had happened, an accident. Then I saw the headlines on my news app. Anonymous local claims record. $384 million jackpot. Winner of historic lottery prize chooses. Anonymity through Serenity Trust. My stomach dropped. It was happening, they knew, or at least they suspected. I opened the text messages. My hands were trembling. The first was from my mother. "Jenny, is that you? Please tell me it's you. We saw the news. Call me immediately." The next was from Eli. "Jen, the Serenity Trust. Is that us? We can finally launch my brand on a global scale. This is it. The moment we've been waiting for. Call me back. We need to strategize." He used the words us and we. Of course he did. Then came Sophie's. "OMG, bestie, is it I am literally screaming, Ren. Remember how I always believed in you, lol. We should go shopping. Like Paris shopping. Call me back." XOXO, and finally my father's, ever the pragmatist, Jennifer. "We need to discuss responsible wealth management. Do not speak to anyone until you speak to me. There will be many people trying to take advantage of you." The hypocrisy was so stunning it was almost comical. They were worried about other people taking advantage of me. The tidal wave of messages was overwhelming, a desperate, greedy grab for a piece of me they thought they owned. But the most telling part? Not a single one of them mentioned the last time we had spoken. Not a single one said, "I'm so sorry I didn't help you when you called." It was as if that night had never happened. My moment of feigned desperation had been so insignificant to them that it had been completely erased by the glare of a 9-figure number. I felt a surge of cold, clear anger. I took a deep breath, put the phone on silent, and placed it face down on the table. I did not reply. I would let my lawyer handle everything. Arthur had prepared for this. He was my firewall. The next 2 days were a siege. They called my work. They left frantic voicemails. They texted constantly. I ignored it all. I felt strangely calm, detached. It was like watching a movie about someone else's life. On Thursday evening, they escalated. As I was leaving my apartment to meet Emily for dinner, I saw my parents' car parked on the street. They were standing by the main entrance to my building, waiting for me. My mother was holding a casserole dish, a classic weapon in her arsenal of passive aggression. My first instinct was to turn and run. But the new Jenny, the one who had sat in that motel room and made a decision, stopped me. I owed myself peace, Emily had said. And peace, I was beginning to realize, wasn't about running away. It was about standing still and holding your ground. I walked towards them, my steps steady. My mother rushed forward, her face a mixture of anxiety and forced cheerfulness. "Jenny! Honey, we've been so worried. You haven't been answering your phone," she gushed, shoving the warm casserole dish into my hands. It was her signature lasagna, the one she made when she wanted something, or when she had done something wrong and wanted to pretend she hadn't. "We're family, Jen," my father said, his voice low and serious. He stood slightly behind her, like a general observing a negotiation. "You can't just shut us out like this. We love you." The words hung in the air, hollow and false. I looked from his stern face to my mother's pleading smile. I looked at the casserole dish in my hands. It felt heavy, a bribe. I took a deep breath and looked my mother directly in the eye. My voice, when it came out, was quiet, calm, and utterly devoid of the emotion she was expecting. "You hung up on me?" I said. Her smile faltered. "What? What are you talking about?" "Last week," I continued, my gaze unwavering, "when I called you from the side of the road, when I told you I had lost everything and I was scared, when I asked you for $50. You told me not to guilt you with my drama, and you hung up on me." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at my father for help, but he was staring at me, his expression unreadable. I thought you were testing me," she stammered, the excuse flimsy and pathetic. "I thought it was some kind of test." A cold, sad smile touched my lips. The irony was devastating. She was closer to the truth than she knew. "I said softly. My voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. "And you failed." I gently placed the casserole dish on the ground next to the potted plant by the door. I didn't shove it at her. I didn't drop it. I just let it go. Then, without another word, I turned around, walked back into the lobby of my building, and let the heavy glass door swing shut behind me. I didn't look back to see their faces. I didn't need to. The click of the door locking was the only sound. It was the sound of a chapter ending. It was the sound of closure. There was no shouting, no anger, no final dramatic confrontation. There was just a quiet, clean break. Months passed. The initial frenzy over the lottery winner died down, replaced by other headlines, other dramas. My life, which had been thrown into such chaos, slowly found a new quiet rhythm. My lawyer, Arthur, handled everything with silent, ruthless efficiency. A new unlisted phone number, a post office box for my mail. He was the impenetrable wall between my new life and my old one. The most surprising decision I made, to everyone but myself was that I kept my job. I didn't need to work, of course. I could have spent the rest of my life on a beach, sipping drinks with little umbrellas in them, but the thought of it felt empty. My job at the dental clinic was real. It was a place where I was competent, where I helped people in a small but tangible way. It grounded me. So, 3 days a week, I still put on my scrubs, washed my hands 100 times, and told people to floss more. The difference was that now it was a choice. Every day I went to work was a day I chose to be there. The freedom wasn't in not working. It was in the power to choose. I sold my small cramped apartment and bought a modest house by a lake about an hour out of the city. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a 10-car garage or a home theater. It had big windows that looked out over the water, a small garden where I was attempting to grow tomatoes, and a fireplace that crackled on cool evenings. It was peaceful. It was a home, not a status symbol. My toxic Sunday dinners were replaced by quiet Sunday breakfasts. Emily would drive out, and we'd sit on my back porch with coffee and talk for hours. We were more than cousins now. We were partners. The Second Chances Fund was officially up and running. We had a small board, a clear mission, and our first few anonymous grants had already gone out. Sometimes 1 or 2 of the women we were helping would join us for breakfast. A young single mother who needed help with a down payment on a reliable car. A woman in her 50s who had spent her life caring for her parents and needed funds to go back to school. We never talked about money. We talked about their children, their classes, their hopes. We had formed a new family, one built not on obligation or blood, but on shared experience and mutual support. It was a family where everyone was seen. I learned to find joy in small things. The way the sun glittered on the lake in the morning, the taste of a homegrown tomato, the deep, dreamless sleep that came from a quiet mind. The money was a silent tool in the background. I donated to local charities, always anonymously. I paid for the town library's renovation. I funded a new wing at the local animal shelter. The money was a source of good in the world, but I refused to let it become the source of my identity. My old family still tried to reach me. For the first few months, the letters were a deluge of apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas, all forwarded to me by Arthur's office. My mother wrote about how she had been under so much stress. Eli wrote about the incredible opportunity I was squandering. Sophie sent me a Tiffany bracelet with a note that said, "Family is forever." My father sent a detailed financial plan he had drafted for me. I read them all, at first. I felt a flicker of the old pain, the old guilt, but it was fainter now, like a scar that no longer hurt to the touch. I never replied. After a while, the letters became less frequent. Their anger and desperation faded into a kind of resentful silence. I didn't block their numbers from my old phone, which I kept in a drawer. Sometimes, on a day when I felt particularly strong, I would turn it on and see the messages that had piled up. "Jenny, please call me. Jen, we miss you. You're tearing this family apart." The words no longer had any power over me. They were just echoes from a life that wasn't mine anymore. They were trying to guilt a person who no longer existed. One evening, I was sitting by the fire, reading a book, when a thought drifted into my mind. I thought about my mother's face in the lobby, the crumbling smile. I thought about Eli's entitled laughter, Sophie's careless giggle, my father's cold lecture. I realized, with a sense of profound calm, that I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them ill. I just felt nothing. They were strangers who shared some of my DNA. The emotional cord had been so cleanly severed that there was nothing left to feel. That, I realized, was the true meaning of closure. Closure isn't revenge. It's not a dramatic confrontation or a final witty comeback. It's not about making them feel the pain they made you feel. It's silence. But it's a different kind of silence. It's not the lonely, aching silence of my old apartment. It's a quiet, peaceful silence. The silence that doesn't ache anymore. It's the sound of freedom. It's the sound of a wound that has finally truly healed. I look into the camera now, not from a cramped car or a lonely apartment, but from the quiet comfort of my own home. The sun is setting over the lake behind me, and the world is peaceful. My story had a shocking beginning, a lottery ticket worth a fortune. But the money was never the point. It was just the magnifying glass that showed me the truth. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one who gives and gives until there's nothing left, don't wait for a lottery ticket to show you the truth. You don't need a test. You already have the data. You already know. Don't wait for them to see you. Be your own proof. The real jackpot isn't the money. The real jackpot is finding the person who will drive 3 hours in the middle of the night with their last $100 in an envelope. Not because they have to, but because you needed them. If someone ever does that for you, keep them forever. They are the real prize. My name is Jenny, and I am finally, wonderfully, peacefully rich. Like this video if you've ever been the one who always gave. Subscribe if you're ready to stop apologizing for it.